Broadcasting live from Moscow, this is RT's Weekly News Review. Now, Syria's chemical weapons must be removed or destroyed by the middle of next year under a deal reached by the US and Russia. There are 6 key points in the groundbreaking agreement. Let's take a look at what they are. Well, the exact quantity of Syria's chemical weapons will be determined and put under international control. But first, Syria will have to submit a full list of its stockpiles within a week. After that, these arms can be destroyed under the Chemical Weapons Convention. International inspectors will get immediate access to weapons storage facilities to begin the destruction process. Well, if Syria doesn't comply, it could lead to a Chapter 7 UN Security Council resolution which allows for the use of force. As RT's Anissa Narwe now reports, this deal doesn't necessarily mean that the threat of a US strike is no longer looming over Syria.
Signed, sealed, and if delivered, it could see Syria hand over its chemical weapons stockpiles. Russia and the U.S. agreed on a 6-point plan after a week of talks.
I think the main factor is the willingness of Russia to take responsibility, and Russia taking the lead, Russia making some proposal. This is really changing the whole figure, the whole physiognomy of the situation.
The plan is seen as a last diplomatic push to prevent a military intervention into Syria.
There can be no games, no room for avoidance, or anything less than full compliance by the Assad regime. In the event of non-compliance, we have committed to impose measures under Chapter 7 within the UN Security Council.
All sides, including rebel groups, will be responsible for the safety of international inspectors and will have to provide free access to the sites.
Of course, this does not mean that every time a violation is reported, actions will be taken automatically. We'll first have to verify and review such reports thoroughly, because there are a lot of fabrications and lies surrounding this issue, and we have to be very careful.
Russia is still wary of U.S. threats of force, but more than welcomes the U-turn in war rhetoric from the White House. Obama seemed more than ready to attack at all cost.
He was forced to back off on a policy that a week ago he was committed to launch a bombing campaign. And I think the Russian leadership and the American people have boxed him in.
But some experts aren't convinced that this step by the Assad regime with U.S. and Russian support will be enough.
It also, as some American commentators have pointed out, leaves the way open to do to Assad what the Americans did to Gaddafi. Gaddafi, after all, agreed to give up his chemical weapons, his various other non-conventional weapons, and then a few years later he was attacked.
And the rebels' immediate rejection of these latest diplomatic efforts makes it clear their pursuit for foreign intervention is not over. Damascus now has until next weekend to provide the UN with a complete list of its stockpiles. If Assad continues to cooperate, will it be enough to push for peace without the cooperation of the rebels and their supporters? Anissa Narwe, RT, Moscow.
Well, on Wednesday, Russia's president stated his case against military intervention in Syria to the American people in an open letter published by the New York Times. Vladimir Putin laid out the reasons, saying such a move would not only be ineffective, but also dangerous. And there's already a response being planned by one of America's high-profile politicians. Lindsay France told us more now about what he had to say.
One of the biggest parts of it was the need for international law, that the United Nations should not go the way of the League of Nations. It's got to be valid. Then he went on to speak about the poisonous gas possibly used in Syria itself and the danger surrounding the way we go in and deal with that. Let's listen to what he wrote about that.
No one doubts that poison gas was used in Syria, but there is every reason to believe it was used not by the Syrian army, but by opposition forces to provoke intervention by their powerful foreign patrons who would be siding with the fundamentalists. Reports that militants are preparing another attack, this time against Israel, cannot be ignored.
Another thing he addresses that garnered strong reaction from many Americans was what is so often heard in American political speeches. It's that of the so-called American exceptionalism, that since America is often motivated to act based on moralistic reasons, it is therefore exceptional, greater, better, or separate. And he points out that that is a very slippery slope and a dangerous mentality for any nation to have.
It is extremely dangerous to encourage people to see themselves as exceptional, whatever the motivation. We are all different, but when we ask for the Lord's blessings, we must not forget that God created us equal.
Media has churned out reports of Senator McCain expressing a wish to pen his own editorial in Russian publication Pravda. However, a little confusion popped up because it wasn't known whether he was referencing Pravda, the printed publication, the Communist Party mouthpiece all through Soviet times, and it must be said, not exactly the New York Times of Russian media. However, there is another Pravda, Pravda.ru, the news website, at times very avant-garde. Now, however surprised the Russian public may have been at hearing this, one person stepped forward to offer McCain a spot on television. That's right, a presenter with Rossiya television channel said he would like to offer McCain a spot on his interview show. So, McCain has many invitations.
Well, the chemical weapons agreement came about because the West blamed the Syrian government for a deadly chemical attack last month. RT's Bill Dodd spoke to Belgian writer Pierre Pichinin, who was held hostage by the Syrian opposition. He heard his captors discuss the attack and insists the government had nothing to do with it. You may find the following images disturbing.
I don't think Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian government are to blame for the chemical attack in Al-Ghouta. During that time, my Italian friend and I had been taken hostage by jihadists from the al-Farouk group in Syria. We were held at one point in a room facing an office of the Free Syrian Army and the al-Farouk jihadist group. We have been in the barracks of the Free Syrian Army and of the al-Farouk jihadist group as well, and we heard a conversation from this office. The conversation was between one general from the Free Syrian Army. We knew him from earlier, as he was the one who was in charge of our detention, and another officer from the Farouk Brigade. There was also a third person who was speaking perfect English, and they were talking to him via Skype. They were talking about the events of Al-Ghouta in the Damascus suburb, and from the conversation it was clear that the Syrian government wasn't behind the attack.
Was it clear to you what the motivation was to use chemical weapons to launch a gas attack on civilians in this way? What was the motivation, do you think? Was it mentioned?
Their motivation wasn't clear from the conversation, but we figured that it would have been absurd for the Syrian government to use chemical weapons. The regime had nothing to gain from the Al-Ghouta massacre. On the contrary, it played into the hands of its enemies, the US, France, and the UK. It gave them a good reason to use force against the Assad government. Either the Syrian government lost its mind, but I don't believe that, or the authors of the attack are the opposition, and it is clear that the rebels are the ones who wanted to benefit from the situation. Let us remind you that the rebels already tried to simulate a gas attack a year ago in Homs. They made a video showing people on the ground acting as if they had been victims of neurotic gas.
Well, this week, the Syrian army successfully liberated the ancient Christian village of Malala from the rebels. The battle went back and forth, but government troops were eventually able to push the jihadists back into nearby mountains. RT's Maria Fanoshna was in the war zone. Here's her latest report.
So we're right now in the center of Malala village. Everywhere we can see signs of recent battle. We hear shelling, but we were told that this is the Syrian army.
The mood is cheerful. Soldiers are smiling and relieved. The jihadists have been booted out.
Some of them were killed, some of them escaped.
Locals joined the army to defend their native town. The soldiers in light-colored uniforms are the so-called national defense.
The terrain here is very difficult with mountains and caves, but we know the area better, so we are carrying on with the operation.
We come across one grocery shop owner who we filmed back in 2012. Then he told us that the armed rebels hasn't come to their village. And why would they? This time he's armed with a gun among Syrian soldiers, and he has some questions again.
Syria is a land of history and of love. They sent terrorists here from all corners of the world to kill Syrians and each other. Why? I ask the world, why? If a European citizen is so much as slapped across the face, there'd be a scandal. While in Syria, how many victims? How many hundreds of thousands have been slaughtered? When will it stop?
We quickly find out that it won't be today. Held by the militants for a week, it seems that mountaintop Safir Hotel still poses a threat.
That's Safir Hotel. Our goal was to liberate it and push on to Mar-Tahla Monastery. But we couldn't do it. Their snipers are everywhere.
Ma'aloula is home to many Christian churches and monasteries, as well as mosques. Everywhere we go here, we see either crosses or minarets. Now, added to these, we see black jihadist flags. It's time to head back.
Hey, stop!
But while in the car, something goes wrong. We take cover in a place where we find dozens of army soldiers hiding from enemy's bullets. The main road is being targeted, and it is our only way out. We think over our chances when our engineer gets hit. Thankfully, it's not serious. But it becomes clear we can't wait a minute more.
We're now stuck here in this corner, and we're now trying to get out of here using this way.
No! If happen anything, don't back. Don't back. Go.
Okay, clear.
Yalla.
Did you hear the bullets? Did you hear them whizzing by?
Now say that we've reached safe area. They're firing from behind this building, and we were told that this is the Syrian army again. Let's hope it is true. So you guys stay.
And we leave, while governmental forces continue their offensive on Ma'aloula village, which, despite the claims, remains under siege. Maria Fnoshna RT, reporting from Syria.
Well, Maria Fnoshna is one of the few international correspondents on the front line of the Syrian conflict. You can also follow her on Twitter to keep track of more developments in Ma'aloula.
To be in the know, follow us online.